All right. Well, hey, I'm so glad to be with y'all today. So thankful for the invitation to be here. I was told I have about 3 hours. Is that about right? I'm just kidding. I know we've all eaten and we're probably all ready for an afternoon nap and things like that. In a setting like this, one thing I like to do when I share my story is hopefully make it a little interactive. So throughout the time that we're talking together today, I'm going to ask you to share with your neighbor and to share some things with your neighbor and things like that. So just be prepared for that, okay? Don't just make it an awkward silence when I ask you to talk with your neighbor. Go ahead and talk with your neighbor here in a few minutes about a couple of different things, but only when I ask you to, okay? And we'll be in good shape. Again, my name is Josiah Presley. I am coming here from Oklahoma, so in the United States. And so, for the most part, when I'm in different parts of the world, when I say Oklahoma, I have to then tell people it's the state just north of Texas because nobody knows where Oklahoma is, but everybody knows where Texas is apparently. So, came from Oklahoma. I did spend some time in Texas. That's where I went to school. It's where I met my wife. And me and my wife, we have two beautiful daughters, who I'll share a little bit about a little later on. But during our time together today, I don't want to just share my story with you. I also hope that this will be a time to encourage you, a time to challenge you, and a time to call you to what God might have for you. Okay, so as we get started, there's 4 challenges I'm going to give you this afternoon, and before you feel insulted that I'm going to challenge you, I just want to let you know that these are challenges that I myself, in my own story, I have had to deal with. I have had to answer the call to. And so anything I ask you to think about, consider with your life today, I want you to know that I have first had to consider it with my own life. So here's the 4 challenges I want you to think about today. The first one is this. I want to challenge you to know what you believe. The second thing I want to challenge you to do is I want to challenge you to care about what you believe. But thirdly, I don't want you to just care about what you believe. I want to challenge you to care well about what you believe. There's a very big difference between caring and caring well. And so I want us to make sure we bridge that gap. And then the fourth thing I'm going to challenge you to this afternoon is to do something about those beliefs. So know what you believe, care about those beliefs, care well about those beliefs, and do something about it. So starting out, just something, share with your neighbor for just a couple moments really quickly. What is the earliest memory that you have of your understanding of what it means to be pro-life? Like, what is the earliest memory you have of the introduction to what it means to be pro-life or to the idea of being pro-life? So share with your neighbor, take just a minute. The earliest memory you have of knowing what it means to be pro-life. It might be this moment right here. I don't know. Talk to your neighbor, man. Your neighbor over here. Okay, all right, all right. I'll cut you short now. Those sound great. You all obviously have very good memories. So when I think about my earliest memory of what it means to be pro-life, I really can't think of a specific time in my life because being pro-life was part of who my family was. So I grew up in Norman, Oklahoma. I'm adopted. I'm one of 12 children. 10 of us are adopted. My dad, he's the pastor of worship at the church I grew up in, and my mother is a children's minister. So I grew up in a very Christian home. I grew up in a very pro-life home. My parents, they lived out these pro-life convictions through adopting. They adopted 10 children. That's how they lived out what it meant to be pro-life. And for as long as I can remember, all throughout my childhood, we had this understanding of what it meant to be pro-life, that abortion was wrong because it is a taking of innocent human life. The abortion was wrong because it's taking of human life that is valuable because it's life that's created in the image of God. Like, this is the heartbeat of what it means to be pro-life. This understanding and this belief that human life is valuable. And for the Christian, we believe that human life is valuable because we believe that humans are created in the image of God. And because of that, intrinsically, we are valuable. By the very nature of being human beings, our lives have value because we're created in the image of God. This is a belief that my family held. This is a belief that I knew we held. This is a belief I would have said I held for years as a child. But if I'm honest with you, I did not care for the majority of my childhood on a day-to-day basis about these beliefs. It did not affect or change the way I lived my life. Now, I knew it was these pro-life convictions that led my parents to adopt me and my siblings. I knew it was something we believed in and we held tightly to, but it's not something that on the regular basis I thought about or it changed my life. But I can tell you where I started to care about what it means to be pro-life. It was when I was 13 years old, and at the age of 13, my adopted parents, they set me down for a difficult discussion. They thought I was old enough to know more about my adoption story and the circumstances that led up to the adoption. And they told me about how 2 months into my birth mother's pregnancy with me in South Korea, my birth mother had a D&C abortion. This is the type of abortion where the doctor goes into the mother's womb and rips the baby apart and brings them out in pieces. Now, at the time, they thought everything had gone how it was supposed to. They thought everything had gone according to plan. And so they sent her home. But it wasn't until a few months later that she realized that the abortion actually failed and I was still very much so alive. And so I was kept and I was born later on that year, October 7th of 1995. I was placed in a foster home for about 13 months before I was adopted and I was brought over to the States. So I can tell you something. At this age of 13, I went from knowing these beliefs and not caring about these beliefs to caring about these beliefs in a very real way. Because all of a sudden, I was confronted with how closely intertwined my story was to the issue. And so I began to care about the issue. Now, here's something I want you to think about for a second. In your life, when did you go from knowing and hearing that first moment you just shared about learning about what it means to be pro-life to actually caring about what it means to be pro-life? Maybe it was the same instance. Maybe it was a difficulty. Maybe it was something along the line, or maybe it's this moment today. But share with your neighbor, when was a moment when you started to actually care about those beliefs? When you adopted, accepted what it meant to be pro-life and to live that out. Share that with your neighbor. When did you begin to care about those beliefs in your own life? All right, here we go. So, we can bring it back in. So going back to my story, so here at this moment, at 13, I started to care about what it meant to be pro-life. But if I'm honest with you, I did not care in a good way, in a right way, in a healthy way, or in a loving way. Because all of a sudden, I was blinded and I was confronted with two different emotions: hurt and anger. So you see, as a small child, for most of my childhood, I struggled with self-image issues, self-worth issues. Because of my deformity, I thought I was less than others. I thought I was of less value. I thought that it didn't matter what I went on to do in life, it would never measure up to somebody else. And at this point in my life, while I was so thankful to my adopted parents for sharing this portion of my story with me, because it is part of my story, there's immense hurt and pain. Because now in my mind, I had proof that my life was worthless. You see, My own mother, my own flesh and blood, the people who should have loved me the most, they thought my life was so worthless they tried to take it. I had proof in my mind that my life was of no worth, that my life was of no value. There was so much hurt there. But alongside of that hurt, there was also anger because I knew it was wrong. I had grown up with these pro-life beliefs. We knew that abortion was a taking of innocent human life. How could they do something so evil towards me? I blamed the fact that I had a deformed arm on their decision to have an abortion. How could they make a decision like that that would leave me so broken and so less than others? There was hurt, there was anger, but I cared about what it meant to be pro-life, but not in a good way, not in a healthy way. I became involved in pro-life work in my area, in my city. And I can tell you right now, I can look back and I can see it. I can remember the anger and the hatred that came out of me during that time. You see, I demonized anybody on the other side. Post-abortive women and men who had made decisions for abortion, I thought they were the worst people on the earth because it's people like them who made me the way I was, broken and less than others. I demonized abortion doctors. I demonized Planned Parenthood workers, pro-choice activists. Anybody on the other side of the argument, I demonized, thinking they were the worst of the worst because there's evil people like them who made me the way I was. I was angry. I was hurting. I was broken. But I didn't stay that way. I can tell you I didn't stay that way because if I stayed that way, there's no way I'd be here with you today. And the change that occurred in my life occurred the summer after my sophomore year of high school when I was 16 years old. I was at church camp with my youth group and Jesus met me there. You see, I had professed faith in Jesus at a young age, but I did not have a relationship with him. I liked the idea of Christianity. I liked the idea of following him. I liked the idea of the image it gave me. I found value and worth in being a good Christian kid. But that year at camp, Jesus met me where I was, broke me down of my pride of thinking I could somehow earn his love, and he gave me identity. He gave me value. He gave me purpose. He gave me worth. And as I began to find my identity, value, my worth, and not who Josiah is, not in the things Josiah could accomplish, not in the things that Josiah was able to do, but in who Jesus is and the work that he has done. And the sacrifice that he made on the cross for the punishment of my sins to draw me into a relationship with him that I might have a restored relationship with the God of the universe through Jesus. As I found my identity, my value, my worth, my purpose in him, my life began to change. It began to change in so many ways, not in just the way I viewed myself, the way I understood myself, but it changed my views and the way I viewed what it meant to be pro-life. A passage of scripture that has stuck with me is Psalm 139. It says, "For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in the secret. Intricately woven in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them." This is a passage of scripture I had heard I don't know how many times growing up. But as I began to find my identity, my value, my worth in Jesus, the scripture gained a new meaning in my life. As I recognized those truths about myself and God's love for me. But not just God's love in the way that God sees me in those ways, but the way that God sees every unborn child in those ways. But not just the way that God sees every unborn child in those ways, the way God sees every born person in those ways. And God did this work in my life as he reminded me of these truths about who I am, as he reminded me of these truths about who the unborn are, and also as he reminded me of these truths about who my born neighbors are. He brought forgiveness in my life. Because while I found forgiveness in Jesus, I was also confronted with the reality of my unforgiveness and my hatred towards my birth parents, and my hatred towards anybody on the other side of the argument. And as Jesus changed my life, I was reminded of this reality, that my life is valuable because I'm a human being created in the image of God. That the unborn's life is valuable because they're human beings created in the image of God. That abortion doctors, their lives are valuable because they're people created in the image of God. That pro-choice people, their lives are valuable because they're people who are created in the image of God. That post-abortive women and men, their lives are valuable because they're human beings created in the image of God. That my parents, my birth parents, their lives are valuable because they are human beings created in the image of God. And as God changed my heart, I went from caring about my beliefs in a wrong way, in a hurtful way, in an angry way, to caring about them in a good way, a true way, a right way. As I began to recognize that to be pro-life, it means, yes, save the babies, save the children. We have to do that. But the way in which we do it matters. And here's the reality. We cannot demonize, belittle, and hate one piece of the population in favor of the other population. We can't demonize, hate, and belittle those on the other side of the argument in the sake of saving babies. We can't do that because that's what the other side is already doing. We have to be different. We have to live differently. We have to love differently. And so as I began to care well about what it meant to be pro-life, it started to move its way into action in my life. In Proverbs 31, he tells us to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, to speak up and judge righteously for all who are poor and destitute. In James 1, it tells us that pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this: to care for the orphan and widow in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. And for me, as I started to continue my way through high school and as I found my identity purpose in Christ, it looked like for me sharing my story and beginning to share my story and do it in different places to help mobilize people to care about these beliefs. When I think about what it means to live out and to act and to do something about your beliefs, I can't help but think of my adopted parents, Randy and Kathy Presley. People who you would never know. People whose names you'll probably never hear again. But people who are faithful to live out their beliefs as God has called them to and who's changed the lives of so many others, particularly myself and my 11 other siblings, 10 of us adopted from all sorts of different circumstances. Some from orphanages, some from literally off the street, some from ones who had been adopted and had been given back up for adoption. Countless situations. Their first adoption came when my adopted mother, she was counseling women at a crisis pregnancy center. And a young woman came in adamant she had to have an abortion. And it was my mom there faithfully loving and caring for her and speaking the truth to her. And this young woman asked my mom, she said, well, if I keep this baby, will you adopt this child? And my parents, being who they are, having the beliefs that they have, caring about them the way they care about them, said, yes, we'll adopt. And they adopted my older sister, and that was their first adoption that started them on the road to adoption, that led to the 9 others that they would come to adopt. And that's what it looked like for them to live out their beliefs. Question is, what will it look like for you to live out your beliefs? And here's the reality of the matter. There's so many different opportunities, and there's so many different places each and every single one of you go into when you leave this place today. You have different spheres of influences, different circles you go into, different people you will come into contact and you will be around. The question is, how will you speak into those situations? Right now, maybe there are loved ones you need to have some difficult conversations with right now for the sake of an unborn family member whose life is on the line. Maybe there are friends you need to have a conversation with so that they know if they ever find themselves in such a situation, you're there as a friend to help and care for that life. Maybe for you, it looks like you need to reinvigorate your efforts as a part of the work that is taking place. Whether it be through one of the organizations represented here today, whether it be through your work with the Life Institute, whatever it may be, or giving towards them, or whatever it might look like. But what would it look like for you to actually live out those beliefs? If you say you believe them, if you say you care about them, if you say you care well about them and are going to care about them, what will it look like in your life when you leave this place to actually do something about those beliefs? Now, here's the challenging part. Here's the difficult part. I gave you the warm-up with the first 2. I want you to turn to your neighbor right now, and I want you to share with your neighbor what is one way that you can do something about your beliefs when you leave out of here today? Think about that and share with your neighbor. What is one way you can do something about these beliefs that you say you care about when you leave here today? Okay, here we go. Here we go. Now, here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to do. Turn to the neighbor who just told you what they're going to do to live out these beliefs, and let's say we're just talking hogwash just now. Turn to them who just told you that and tell them, I'm going to hold you to it now. Okay. Last couple things I want to leave you with. I want to leave you with two final thoughts here. And then I don't know if, I don't mind do we want to do Q&A after this? Okay. I'm going to leave with two thoughts, and then we can do some Q&A if anybody wants to ask any questions. First one is this. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus tells his followers, he says this, you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor does anybody light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. It says, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. We live in a dark world. We live in a world that is a culture of death. We live in a world that says what should be the safest, most sacred, protected place on earth is the most dangerous place on earth. And we say, what do we do about that? Where is the light? How can there be light? And here's the reality. If you follow Jesus, if you belong to Jesus, he's left you here to be that light. So will you be that light? The second thing I want to leave you with is this thought. So I have two daughters. I have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. Julia and Audrey are their names. And when I look at my two daughters and when I think about what it means to be pro-life, I think of two things in particular. I think of the faithfulness of followers of Jesus who are pro-life, who've come before us to bring us to where we're at today. I think of the faithfulness of my adopted parents, Randy and Kathy Presley, who didn't go out and change the world, but they changed my world. And because of that, today I have two more beautiful human beings in this world. I'm reminded of their faithfulness and the faithfulness of countless others who've brought us to where we're at today. But I'm also reminded of my calling as a father, as a husband, as a human being, as a follower of Jesus, to leave this world a better place for them, for the next generations. And when we talk about this work, we're not just talking about leaving a brighter, better future for the next generations. For many, we're talking about leaving a future at all for them. She just mentioned 1 out of 6 children. 1 out of 6. The work we are doing when we live out these beliefs, when we care well about these beliefs, when we act on them, we're talking about saving lives for generations and generations and generations to come. And you may feel like I'm never going to go on and change the whole world, but you don't have to change the whole world. Change one person's world, and that will be worth it. Why will that be worth it? Because that one person is worth it. Why is that one person worth it? Because they are a human being created in the image of God, whose life is valuable, who we're called to care for and love. So thank you for your time, and we can take a few questions now if you'd like.